Um, I suggest we listen to the second speaker and then take the questions together. Is that okay? So our second speaker, thank you, Dr. He, that was fascinating. Our second speaker is Dr. Tutin Aryanti. She is a professor at Universitas Pendidikan in Indonesia. Her PhD is from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I assure you she has an equally impressive bio. I'm not going to go through it in the interest of time, but I'll introduce her presentation. Title is On Visibility and Patronage, the Mosques for and by Women in Indonesia. So Dr. Tutin, welcome.
Thank you, Mahan, for the kind introduction. Please let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, can you see the my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are now. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Michael, Martha, and all the organizers for inviting me. Also, thank you, Professor Abidin Kusno, for the suggestion. It is such an honor to be here to present my work and my future work in this workshop. So I have been working on gender and Islamic architecture for more than a decade now. But why do we need to study women and the mosque? First, because we have seen that the architectural history has been dominated by grand, beautiful, and monumental mosques built by princely patronage. And second, we are surrounded by a hegemonic discourse in which women and the Islamic public space are separated. So, taking gender as a category of analysis in the study of the mosque will generate our awareness of the significance of minor groups, or in this case, women, in Islamic architectural history. And in this presentation, I would like to discuss how the women's mosque deal with visibility in Islamic architectural history. In Indonesia, as it is the case anywhere in the Islamic world, women's mosques are not common facilities. My study highlights 3 women's mosques in the city of Yogyakarta, Indonesia, among very few women's mosques that survive in Indonesia. The first one is Masjid Keputren, which is located inside the women at the Yogyakarta Sultanate Palace. This was built in the 19th century and was renovated in 1989 to accommodate royal women and their female attendants. The second one is Musalla Aisyah, and this was built by Ahmad Dahlan in 1922, and it is located in Kauman village of Yogyakarta. So Ahmad Dahlan was the founder, the Indonesian modern, quote-unquote, Islamic movement, the Muhammadiyah organization and its female wing, the Aisyah. And this mosque is managed by the Aisyah of Kauman village and has become a center of women's religious activities. The Aisyah Mosque was one of Dahlan's program to combat the traditional Javanese view of women as subordinate human beings who did not deserve participating in public praying and education. And still in Kauman village, there is another women's mosque which was founded by Nyai or Mrs. Zainab Humam, the village female Islamic teacher. And this mosque is managed by the Ar-Roshad Foundation and has served as a center of women's religious activities as well. So one important question that comes to mind is why we will rarely, or if not never, see the women's mosque in Islamic architectural books. So the absence of women's prayer space in architectural history can be due to either their absence in the public space or their invisibility to the public eye. First, the lack of interest in exposing and discussing these women's prayer spaces may have been due to their physical appearance. So here we see the map of the Kauman village, and the village was historically established as a settlement for the religious officials and servants who serve at Masjid Gede Kauman. This is Masjid Gede Kauman. And the Grand Mosque, this Grand Mosque has been the visitors' main destination when they come to the village. So Masjid Gede Kauman was built in 1773 as the Sultanate State Mosque. It represents the ideal model of a traditional Javanese mosque, which Paper and O'Neill describe in their article, having a square plan covered with a triple-tiered pyramidal roof supported by 4 master columns, a rectangular veranda, a women's prayer room at the side, and all of these are in an enclosed courtyard. It is inevitable that we have a preference of looking. Our eyes are trained to look at beauty. The veranda, as we can see here, is elaborately ornamented. It is enlivened by the yellow paint and beautiful floral ornaments. Thus, the glowing veranda has become the main focal point which spectators look at as they arrive at the mosque. And as we enter the main prayer hall, in contrast to the richly elaborated veranda, the interior is simple. We can find the 4 master pillars right here, or called as Soko Guru, supporting the soaring ceiling. This pointed roof has been widely known in Javanese architectural tradition as a feature of a religious building. And additionally, the main prayer hall possesses the features that indicate its privilege as a Sultanate State Mosque. In addition to having a golden mimbar right here and an ornamented mihrab, it also has a maksura, or a box where the Sultan prays when he visits the mosque. So historians may find many aspects to discuss in Masjid Gede Kauman as it presents the uniqueness of Javanese traditional mosque. Now let's see what we can find inside the women's mosque. This is Musola Asia, which is located to the west of the Grand Mosque. The architecture reveals the Dutch colonial influence at the porch, the gable roof, the molded brick columns, and the high ceiling. And like ordinary mosque, there is a mihrab right here in the interior. But it is actually no longer used, since the recent interpretation of the Islamic law recommends that a female prayer leader should stand side by side with her congregations in a line. And then the second women's mosque, Musalla Ar-Rasyad, is hidden among the dense fabric of houses along the village alleys. The mosque is semi-open, and it is actually typologically unusual for not having a mihrab niche. Yeah, I think it is well responding to the practice of female congregational prayer. And this mosque uses a zinc dome right here and applies a few floral ornaments on its columns. But other than that, the mosque is simple. The plan is in fact a reverse L shape. And as we can see in both women's mosques, the architectural features are plain. Photographers may find it difficult to take a picture of the buildings because there is not enough distance around the women's mosque where spectators can see the whole building. The social history with women's mosques are critical because the religious life in public space as a response to the unavailability of the Grand Mosque for women in the early 20th century. The women's mosque works as the other space that allows women's agency, representation, and resistance at the same time. And the second reason of the absence of the women's mosque in the Islamic architectural books is perhaps due to the limited visual accessibility because the spatial restriction. In the palace, for example, the existence of women's know where it is. Some of them are even entirely unaware of the presence of the quarter, not to mention its women's mosque. For architectural historians, it is not simply about the very limited access, but perhaps also due to the architectural appearance that is deemed insignificant. So right here, as we can see in the map, in addition to the Masjid Keputren right here, there's also Masjid Panepen here, which is the Sultan's private sanctuary inside the palace area. We will compare shortly how these two mosques are different. This is Masjid Panepen, and it was built in the 18th century when the palace was erected. The mosque has the features of the typological Javanese traditional mosque. The main prayer hall is square and covered by a two-tiered pyramidal roof. It has 4 master columns, a mihrab niche, and a raised platform right here at the front corner. And it indicates a resource space where the Sultan sits and prays. The mosque also has some inscription right here, telling us the date of its renovation. In contrast, Masjid Keputren has no master columns and ornaments. There is no inscription inside the mosque. And this is actually a big question, since an inscription is an important feature of a Sultanate buildings in Yogyakarta. So my previous works show the absence of women's space in the Islamic architectural history. And now I would like to extend this work to explore women's agency in Islamic architecture. There are 2 mosques that are worth exploring. This one is Masjid Suciati Saliman in Yogyakarta. It was built by Suciati Saliman, a female entrepreneur, and designed by Hadi Prana by bringing the imagined Masjid Nabawi to Yogyakarta. This mosque is significant in the discussion of female patronage because first, it was built by an ordinary woman, and second, it was named after her. And the second mosque is Nurunisa Muslimah Center in Bandung. It was built by Nurunisa Women's Islamic Group and designed by Suwanto Gana. Although designed by male architects, both mosques, Masjid Suciati Saliman and Nurunisa Muslimah Center, represent women's imagination of ideal prayer space for them as a result of their religious experience in other mosques built by men. And to conclude, I hope that this work will further make women and their space more visible in Islamic architectural history. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very well done, not just content, but like the aesthetics. So we appreciate that. Questions for either of our speakers?
Oops, this was mute myself. Sorry.
Yeah, I have a question for Dr. Aryanti. In terms of the main congregational mosques in Indonesia, when do you start seeing separate prayer spaces arranged for women, either within the building or outside of the building? Initially, they were all unencumbered, I understand. But when do we start to see some segregated features?
Okay. I'm trying to listen to the question. I hope I get the question clearly. So you asked me when did I start to pay attention to the segregation at the building? Is that correct?
No. The main congregational mosques, I mean, from the Mosque of Demak onwards, within them, they don't have any segregated space for women, as far as I understand. So in what historical time period in the main congregational mosques do we begin to see in Indonesia a segregated space or the imposition of women in a space apart from the main space?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I haven't found that in the archives, but as far as I understand, as far as I know, that I think the first women's prayer space, or it's called the power strand or the place for women in the mosque. Perhaps the first one is found in Masjid Agung Demak, or Demak Great Mosque, and it was built in, if I'm not mistaken, it's in 1710. And the women's prayer space at the Masjid Gede Kauman was built in 1839. So it's a kind of an additional space to the mosque, because the main prayer hall is it's a square, it's perfectly square, and then the prayer room for in Masjid Demak, Masjid Agung Demak, it is outside the main prayer hall. And in Masjid Gede Kauman as well, the women's prayer room is also an addition. So it's outside of the main prayer hall.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because there isn't a tradition in any other Islamic country that I know of building mosques exclusively for women. Maybe somebody can correct me, but this seems to be exclusive to Indonesia, and it's a fascinating introduction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr.
May I comment? May I say something?
Yes.
When I was in Indonesia, I had to change driver from Christian driver to the Muslim driver to come into the mosque. So in Indonesian setting, women are not necessary to go to mosque. However, they have a space. Sometimes they go to left, sometimes they go to like Demak, which I was not allowed to come in. There are sometimes left side women, right side men. Sometimes women is the back side, sometimes the left side. It depends on the mosque. They change all the time.
Can they hear me?
Thank you. Maybe one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mahan, could I add to he? Yeah, actually the change also happens in Masjid Gede Kauman itself. So the first one, so in 1839, actually the women's prayer room was provided at the side of the mosque. But then according to the Muhammadiyah's interpretation of Islamic law, since the end of the 1950s, the women's lines move into the main prayer hall. So they now pray behind the men without any wall. Dividing wall. So it's only like a portable divider. It's small, just an indexical sign to show that this is the territory for women, just like that. So the change, it's obvious. Thank you for adding to that.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, I think that Bella has something she wants to say.
Sure.
Bella, we can